Hi everyone, welcome to week 3 of my design challenge. Today we're talking about swatching. Just to summarise where we've got to, our design brief was to design a garment that's going to go with a skirt. I wanted it to be fun and refined. We developed a mood board, and the things that I took away from that were around pops of colour, transparency and paying attention to details. And then last week we looked at yarn and we talked about using silk and mohair as fibres that might support those themes. So let's have a look at our swatching. So I've started with some basic stocking stitch swatches here. There are 3 questions I always ask myself when I'm swatching. What worked well? What do I need to change? And what would be the stumbling blocks if someone was knitting this pattern. So here I've done stocking stitch with various needle sizes, and when I'm getting to this size here I'm starting to see some irregularities in my knitting that I'm not liking. But then I thought, well, what if I over exaggerated those irregularities and holes? And so here I've got a lace pattern, which is quite nice, but the overall effect with using it in mohair is it's fluffy and it doesn't quite look refined to me. So then I thought, well, how about we look at injecting some colour. So here we've got a cable pattern, and I used a contrasting colour or contrasting yarn for the central part of the cable, but I thought it really got lost. So then I looked at holding 2 yarns together so that the entire cable was contrasting with the background fabric. I thought that was interesting, but the cable design felt rustic to me, so not refined. I then thought, well, what about if I use colour as a way of joining sections together? So I looked at using colour in decorative seaming. On the left hand side you can see a 3 needle bind off. On the right hand side of the swatch you can see I've added the contrast yarn 1 row before doing the 3 needle bind off. It looked a little bit scrappy, so then I thought, well, I need to look at different ways of joining my sections together. This swatch here was a 3 needle graft followed by an I-cord bind off. I thought that looked interesting, but I didn't like the purl bumps. They looked a bit messy. So then I looked at how I could do my 3 needle graft differently to get rid of the purl bump, and came across this method on the Purl Soho website called the modified 3 needle bind off, and I thought that actually looks quite nice and tidy. I like that decorative seam. I then used the modified 3 needle graft and did an I-cord bind off and thought, yep, that looks quite nice and tidy. And then I thought, well, what if we didn't join the seam in all the places? This might be a little bit more fun. And this was using a buttonhole technique, and I thought that looked messy. So then I looked at how I could seam separate pieces again in a way that looked a bit tidier, and that was a really nice conclusion. So now I'm really thinking about transparency a bit more, and I picked a slip stitch pattern and used a green and an orange yarn, which gave a beautiful transparent effect, but I looked at it and thought, it looks a bit pop culture and it's not very refined. So chose some different yarns here. This is the same pattern, but as you can see I chose 2 yarns which were of a similar weight at the top, and I thought I've really lost the transparent contrast there, so used a different copper coloured yarn which gave me a better transparent effect but not quite enough. So I thought, well, what if I used my main colour yarn held double? What effect would that give me? So I then got this swatch here, which I think is quite effective in terms of highlighting the transparency. The transparent component actually uses a silk stainless steel yarn, while the darker black is a mohair. However, what I didn't like about this swatch was it looked quite fluffy. So then I thought, well, maybe I'll use a smoother yarn, and this is a silk tape together with a top stitching sewing thread. What I thought was less effective was the stitches were a little bit uneven if I was knitting it in the intarsia technique down below, which would give me more variety with shape. But if I kept to straight lines, as the top section shows, it was quite effective. So I hope that's given you an idea of how just starting anywhere with your swatching is okay. Keeping those questions in mind, you'll move through a series of ideas. Out of all of those swatches, I've chosen a couple that I want to take further. The first was this little one with the seaming detail. I'm going to see if I can take that shape and perhaps explore texture in the body of the knitting. And the other idea or concept I really liked was using the silk tape with the transparent sewing yarn, because sewing thread is really easily accessible, so I'm going to be having a think about designs that I can use that feature in. Next week I'll be talking about creating shapes and how to choose shapes that suit you. Have a great week, everybody. It's been lovely touching base with you. Bye.